Thanks for joining us today for block 2 of our beautiful day mystery quilt. Who's excited to get started on the next units and the next 4 blocks for our project? So hopefully you got our email and the Facebook post. Both were the same. That way if you don't do Facebook, you're not left out. For our cutting instructions for today, if you're going to be working along with us. I have done some pre-work, so I don't keep you here too long, but you should be just fine. This is a great, easy block for, we're going to focus today on some strip piecing and subcutting, and then putting those units back together to create a new unit. So let's take a look at our blocks. Here is the Rosy Wonder. So there are 4 units or 4 different blocks. Now again, these fabrics are completely your choice. You can pick any fabrics and any fabric center you would like. It does not have to match the picture, okay? Again, these blocks should measure 16.5 inches after you have got them pieced. And in our cutting instructions, like we have before, you have each block is broken down, okay, with the fabrics that are shown in each unit, and they are labeled A through F. Every A is the same, every B is the same. It's just going to be a matter of the D fabric in block A is going to be different than the D fabric in block B or C, okay? So let's go over to our cutting table here and take a look at step 1. Okay. So in step 1, they want you to grab background C and the print strip E. That is your strip that is 18.5 inches in length. Okay. So you want to make sure that's important that you grab the one that's 18.5. Test your 1/4 inch, make sure that you've got a good 1/4 inch because when we sew this unit together, we need this unit to measure 4.5 inches. Okay, so let's go. We're going to take a background and a print fabric. We're going to put them right sides together and we're going to sew 1/4 inch all the way down the long edge. And we're going to do that 4 times. We're then going to take it over to the ironing board. We want the seam to go towards the print. So when I lay it on the ironing board, I'm going to lay it on the ironing board with the print fabric up. I'm going to set my seam. Okay, so setting the seam is taking the hot iron, just set it down along the seam allowance as you move it along, and that helps to set the fabric and the thread into each other so that when we go to fold this back and up and over, it's going to kind of do it nicely and not fight against you. So once I get that pressed, I'm then going to take my iron and I'm going to again press this seam. Again, just set the iron down. We're not ironing clothes, we are pressing a seam. We want to make sure that when we have this pressed, that it is pressed all the way back over our seam. I don't want any strip sets that have this little lip on it. We need to make sure that it's all the way back and that you can't flip or find a little fold in there, okay? And you're always going to press towards the color, away from the background fabric. Once you have this pressed, this should measure 4.5 inches. If it doesn't measure 4.5 inches, we may need to go press again. You may want to reevaluate your 1/4 inch seam because we're going to be subcutting this into a 4.5 inch square. Now, if it doesn't measure 4.5 and you've done them all and they're all the same, that's fine. The next measurement that we cut, you want to cut whatever the width of your strip measures, okay? So my strip set here measures 4.5. So we're gonna square up the edge, we're gonna come over 4.5 inches and we're gonna cut. If your strip set is 4.25, you're gonna square up the edge, you're gonna measure 4.25 and then you're gonna cut. Whatever we do here, we need this to be a square. Okay, so if this is 4 1/4 and then you cut 4 1/2, it's not going to be a square and things aren't going to line up. So let's take a look at how to square up the edge and subcut. I'm going to lay this on my mat. I'm going to line up one strip with a line on my mat, and I'm going to overhang the edge 1/8 of an inch to less than 1/8 of an inch. I just want to make sure that if I cut along this line right here, that I will cut both fabrics, okay? Because what I'm looking to do is to get a straight edge. So once I have my fabric aligned, I'm going to take my ruler, I'm going to place it on the cutting table here, and I am going to line it up with that line. I'm going to make sure that I'm straight, and then I'm going to trim that edge off. We're then going to measure over 4 1/2. Now I have a 9 1/2 inch square here, so I'm actually going to use the section of the ruler that has the 1/2 inch measurements. This way the half mark is a solid line, whereas if I was using the corner of the ruler where it was solid numbers, then I have to pay attention to this little white line. It's much easier to know if I've got the right measurement if I can do it with the solid lines. So I'm going to come over, I'm going to put 4 1/2 on the edge of my nice cut edge, okay? And I'm going to then make sure that a line on the ruler lines up with my center seam, okay? Because we don't want the edge here to be lined up, but when we look at it, it doesn't go straight. We need to make sure that we get a straight edge. And I'm going to then cut. We need 4 1/2, or whatever measurement that you're doing, units out of this strip set. So don't cut a lot off, okay, because you don't have a lot here. Because if you remember, this strip was 18 1/2, and it's pretty much, we need 18 inches of it. Okay, as you work down, if you can't get the 4 1/2 to line up straight and the straight line across, take a moment and re-square the edge of your strip. Okay. So lined up here, lined up straight across that center line. Let's move out of the glare of the light so that you can see. There we are, right across that center seam. And then I'm going to cut. So you only have about a 1/2 inch extra. So don't go cutting off a ton in order to square up your unit. And then you're going to end up with 4 1/2 inch units. They should be squares, or 4 and whatever your measurement came out to be. And you're going to have this stack for each color combination of block you plan to make. We are going to repeat the same process with fabrics B and D. Now the main difference is fabric B and D are 20 1/2 inches in length, so they're longer. We're going to do the same right sides together, 1/4 of an inch seam. We're going to lay it on the ironing board with the print up, set our seam, flip our fabric, and press it nice and well over top of our seam allowance so that we have a 4 1/2 inch wide unit. Okay? Don't worry if your fabrics don't match at the end. It's not a big deal. So here we have a nice matched pressed unit. Now with this unit, we're again going to square up just like we did before. I'm going to square up the edge here. Now we're going to be cutting 2 1/2 inch segments. So even if you don't come out at the 4 1/2, that's okay. Hopefully it's coming out to be the same measurement that this unit did, which is good. Consistency is overall the real key that we want here. So I'm going to square up my edge. We're now going to measure over 2 1/2 inches. So we are subcutting a 2 1/2 by 4 1/2 inch unit out of this strip. And we need to cut 8 of these from each fabric combination. Line up my 2.5. I've got a line that's going straight across that center seam to help me verify that I am truly a straight unit that we have. Okay. Because I'm using the ruler and the seam allowance in the piece to strip, we don't have to necessarily keep the fabric straight on the cutting mat, because I'm not using the lines on the mat to mark anything once I've squared up the edge. The only time I use the lines on the mat is when I'm trimming my edge to a straight edge. And again, as you cut across, if you're having a hard time keeping this at 2.5 and this on your seam, stop and maybe trim and re-square up the edge, trim a little tiny bit off to get you back into being square. And one more. And again, you only have about a 1/2 inch extra, if even that, depending upon, I mean, that's it out of that strip set. So don't cut a lot off when you are squaring up your units. So we need 4 4.5 inch squares, and we need 8 2.5 by 4.5 inch units. And now we're going to go and piece units 1 and 2 together. Okay, so we have our 2 units. We're going to take the square unit is going to go in the middle. We're going to take the 2 smaller units and put one on each side, and then we're going to flip it. We never should be sewing the same fabrics to each other, okay? So if you've got this, when you put this right sides together and you happen to notice that these 2 are touching, stop. We need to flip it, okay? Also, by doing it that way, when we flip it, because we have pressed the seams towards the print fabric in both strip sets, we're able to nest those center seams together. You can use those fork pins that we talked about last month to hold that seam together, or you can opt to pin in front of and behind the seam to hold it together. Okay, and then we're going to go and we're going to sew all of these units together. Okay, so here it is, 1/4 inch sewn together, making sure our ultimate goal is to get that seam to match. Okay, that seam is going to get pressed to the 2.5 inch unit. So again, put it on the ironing board with the 2.5 inch unit up, set the seam, and then flip and fold that back. Once you have that unit on all of your 4.5 inch ones, we're going to come back and we're going to repeat the process on the other side. So we're now adding another 2.5 unit to a 4.5 inch unit. And we're going to, again, nest the seam, and we're going to sew 1/4 inch. So I have my 1/4 inch presser foot on. I'm threaded both top and bottom with a 50 weight neutral color thread. I have my 1/4 inch foot, like I said, and I know I've also got a mark on my stitch plate at a 1/4 inch. And like I said, more than anything, consistency is key. If you are consistent with the way that you cut and piece, you won't have any problems with most things meeting and matching up. So even if your unit is slightly smaller, it'll still be consistent across. Now, again, put it on the ironing board with the 2.5 unit up, press, and press the seam away from center. So there is your unit. You need 4 of these for each block that we're making, okay? All right. Let me finger press this one. Let's make a block. You're going to take 2 of these units. We are going to sew 4.5-inch squares to each side of 2 units of each color combination. Hope that makes sense. You'll see here in a second. Now, when you cut this unit, if it wasn't 4.5 inches and this unit is like 4.25, you're going to want to cut these squares down to match the height of this section. Okay, that's going to help you be able to make sure that when you put these right sides together, they are the same size. Okay, and then you can make versus them being too big or too small. Okay, so we're going to put them right sides together. We'll sew 1/4 inch. I have some already sewn here. There it is. And we're going to press these seams away from center. All right, and you're going to do that so that you have 2 of them. These are now going to become the top and bottom of our project. Okay, let's see. I'm going to pick the center unit that we're going to use. It's going to be this one for this quilt. We're going to go and do a little bit more sewing here so that I can get the other pieces ready for this unit. I need to finish sewing these 2 pieced units so that we can fill in this blank. All right, let's come on back over here. We're gonna the perfect project to chain piece. You can do all of the same steps for all of the blocks at one time. So I'm gonna if you have any questions, please make sure you drop them in the chat box here or leave a comment. And we can get your answer to you. Okay. We're going to go over to the iron now, which is behind me, and I'm going to press these seams away from center. Okay, now I'm all pressed, and now we need to lay out our block. Now, key point to this, okay, is we need to make sure that this unit, this larger print rectangle, is facing the correct way for our block, okay? So you want to make sure that the print rectangle is away from center. So this is wrong, okay? This one is correct. So the same when you bring this unit into the side here, we don't want the print touching the center. Okay. All right, so give me 1 second. I have the wrong center for the side units that I have sewn. Not that it would matter. Okay. So again, I'm going to position this so that my white is touching white for the project. We're going to take the 2 units that we created, what we're also going to call unit 1. We're going to place them on either side of your center square. And again, everything should be 8.5, and we're going to sew 1/4 inch down each side, attaching unit 1 to your center square. Now, depending upon your block, If you trimmed or anything along that lines, maybe you had a block that was maybe a little short, you were almost 8.5 for the trimming up or something along that line. If you go to match your unit, and if you look here, if I match my edges, that bottom is just slightly bigger than that pieced unit, is just a little bit bigger than this square. So I'm going to match my ends, and anytime you have excess fabric, we're going to put the bubble towards the feed dogs. And so I have this little bit of excess, not much, down towards the feed dog. So I'm going to sew with my block square up. And that extra movement in the feed dog is going to kind of help to ease in that excess that we have in our project. Now, if it's a lot of excess, I mean, the machine can be a miracle worker, but it can't fix everything. So you can see that now it lays nice and flat and my ends meet exactly. I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to position this again, making sure that my rectangle unit of unit 1 is touching the square. I'm going to match my top edge here. I'm going to come down, I'm going to match my bottom edge. And this side lays pretty flat, fits pretty well, so I can sew with either edge up for this unit. Now for this block or this section, when we go to press it, we are going to press it with the seams going to the middle unit. Okay, so we're gonna get this sewn here. I'm going to go over to the ironing board and I'm going to place the block on the ironing board with my panel square up. I'm going to set this seam and then we're going to press up and over so that the seam allowance goes towards the panel square. Okay, and we'll get that pressed and then I'm going to flip it over, set this side, and then flip this one back out so that it looks like that. Okay, so that those seams are going into the middle. I have my center solid square is touching my panel square. Then we're going to take our units that we had sewn the 4.5 inch squares onto, and they're going to get attached here at the top. Again, solid piece towards the center square. I'm going to flip right sides together, and because we have pressed things in opposite directions, we can nest the seams using fork pins, which I took home and don't have here at the moment because I was finishing piecing the units from last month. So how did your units come together last month? Are you excited? Did you try starching? Did you like starching or like sewing your fabrics now that they were starched? I'm curious what your feedback is on it. I've heard some people in the store say they really like it. So I've got a nested unit seam here and I have a nested unit seam here. And if you look, that's just got just a hair bit of a bubble. So when I put this on the machine, I'm going to do so with the fabric that's larger, which is this unit down towards the feed dog, and we're going to sew that section. Camera and pins don't get along. They want to get caught on each other. So I can't say that this is the best seam allowance. So I may be taking this seam out. Where I positioned the camera this time so that you could see better, those pins are in my way. Or the camera's in my way. Something's in my way. But we'll see what that intersection looks like. Okay. Once that unit is done or sewn, we're going to set this seam with the pieced unit up, and then we will press our seam allowance up towards the outside unit. Okay, so that looks pretty good there. That one looks pretty good there. I'm happy with that. So we're going to repeat with the bottom set. And again, background to the square. I'm going to nest my seams together. I'm going to use a Wonder Clip this time and see if that doesn't get caught in the camera as we piece this together. And again, you can see this unit is a little bit bigger, so I'm going to put that down towards the feed dogs. All right. Now this is the last seam on the block. Technically, this is the only seam I ever backstitch on. All the other seams that when we've been piecing have been sewn back across and sealed when we attached another piece to the unit. So the only time I really backstitch on a quilt block is when I add the last row to the unit. And then that will, because that won't get kind of secured or sewn in or sealed until we go to sew the blocks into rows and into the quilt top. So this is the only time that I backstitch on a quilt block. All right. And again, we're going to press this unit with the pieced unit up, cut that string, and then we're going to flip up and press. And there is one of our 16.5-inch squares. So just so you can see, that's another one. Here is another one, and another one. And that is another one. I have more. I have 2 sets here for our project. But you can see that these units, we didn't stick with the same units in the center as what were shown in the images. So you don't have to. You can play this in your own game. You do not have to use the fabrics that are shown in the picture either as well for you. Do I have any questions? This is block 2 of the rows of our beautiful day block of the month. We have 4 16.5-inch squares of this unit, and you should have from last month your 4 16.5-inch squares of the starry-eyed block as well from that. And then you can set your blocks to the side, and we will soon be revealing the next units for this project. Please share your final blocks with us on social media. You can find us on Facebook. We have both a main page and a private group called the MGQB Society. So please feel free to look us up and join us there. We have a lot of project sharing and things that go on inside of that group. We're also on Instagram as well as right here on YouTube. So I look forward to seeing your finished blocks that you have from last month, and hopefully when you get done with this month. And I will see you all soon. Thank you so much. And remember, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us via email, Facebook, Instagram, and we will gladly answer your questions and get back to you and get you back on track. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.